Hi. In this video, we'll start with the first step of the typical process of construction planning. This is the process here. This slide here shows the 8 steps of the process. In different videos, we'll cover parts of the process, but in this video here, we will cover the first step, which is defining the scope of work of the project. So project scope definition means that you need to understand what needs to be constructed. And that's done by studying the project documents and visiting the project site. So some people just are happy with studying the documents, but it's very important to study the site, get familiar with it, understand the spatial constraints, and that will help you to come up with a more reliable plan. So focusing on the project documents, everything we have here, it's hard to visit an actual project site, so we'll cover mainly here how to study the project documents and what documents are involved. So we have the drawings, we have the specs, we have the addenda, and the contract conditions. Here, this is typically the process for the bidding process for a project. So you start by advertising for the bid and then asking bidders to submit. So they buy first the package and submit it, and then you evaluate and then negotiate and award the project to the bidder that got the project. So during the advertisement and this bid package here, it includes the drawing, specs, addendum, and contract conditions. So this is what we call the project documents, or the bid package if you're dealing with design, bid, build projects. So the project drawings here is basically the whole packet of drawing sheets. So it covers different aspects of the project: the surveying, civil, site, structural, mechanical, architectural. So you need to be familiar with reading these different types of sheets and plans, so you will be able to construct a virtual model of the building in your brain and have a full understanding of the scope. The other document that you need also to understand and know how to navigate it is the specs. So every project comes with a full book of specs to define the required specifications and requirements for materials and systems that are put in the project. And we can kind of differentiate between the specs for building projects and civil engineering projects or civil infrastructure projects. For building projects, these include the typical type of work we can see in buildings, so earthwork, foundation, concrete, masonry, steel, and buildings are typically standard in terms of the scope of work that's involved in each one. They're still complicated than if you think about civil engineering projects, but you can say that a building will require excavation, and that's a known package there. The industry kind of agreed on a way or a format to follow when you communicating the specification information for the project, and kind of mostly here specifications are following CSI massive format. So it's published by the Construction Specification Institute, and it's just a structure. It's an outline for how you organize your specs book. You fill it with whatever you want, the different standards that need to be followed, and all of that for materials and inspection and testing. But the outline is the same. So if I'm looking for specs of a component in the building, I know which line in the specs to look for, which page, you can say. In civil infrastructure engineering projects, these are for roads and bridges and dams, and these are developed not the standard for the whole industry, but in the US, it's kind of for every state agency responsible for the type of project, they publish their own specs manual, and they usually maintained by the agency, these agencies. So for roadway or highway, there is Caltrain or Caltrans specs. So they have their own standards for the specs. If we go to Oregon or Washington, they will have similar specs, but they publish their own. They can pick their own way or standards to require in the specs and inspection and testing. So we need to differentiate here in buildings. It's mostly industry-wide specification format, so CSI master format. In heavy projects, you're following whatever that public agency that's responsible for speccing and financing and owning this project at the end, the highway or the dam at the end. So if you focus on buildings here, CSI master format has 50 divisions. You can see some of them are kind of reserved for future building systems, like smart buildings now come up with different building systems. But you start here with first division 0, which is the bidding process. So people typically don't deal with that because they usually follow their bidding processes that they pick. But here, Division 1 is the general construction requirements. We'll see that. And then Divisions 2 all the way to 49, they are covering here the specs of the technical aspects of the project, meaning that the different systems and different type of assemblies that go into the project. So if we skip Division 0 here, the bidding requirements and forms and all of that, we'll jump into right away the ones that you will need once you are awarded the project and the project is yours as a contractor. What information you look in the specs. So you start with Division 1, general requirements. So general requirements are covering the requirements that are not specifically related to an individual activity or part of the work, the actual work, the physical work here. So things like coordinating the project or following up on the progress or having a quality control program or what type of temporary facilities that you put on the site, and then the closeout process. So in summary here, basically what Division 1 is telling you here is giving you information about the detailed procedures for coordination and communication within the project, which means will translate into the minimum overhead that's required for the project. So when you do the cost estimate, like we'll see, when you think about what's my overhead of this project, you need to check Division 1. So you need to see how many people should I staff for all of these coordination, communication, quality, inspection, all of the requirements here that are listed in Division 1. Divisions 2 to 49 are technical divisions. So if we talk about Division 3 is for concrete work, Division 4 is masonry. If you go back here, Division 5 is for metals or steel. So every one of these divisions is covering scope of work that under its name. So for concrete, anything that's cementous material or concrete structures will be covered in this part of the specs. You can see the way that the specs are organized using the master format. It's hierarchical, so it's following a hierarchy of codes or a coding system. So here 03 is concrete, but 0315 is accessories for concrete. So water stops, expansion joints, and anchors, and so these are kind of the accessories of concrete. If you move to 0330, it's a cast in place concrete. So the process of placing the concrete itself, and depends here if you have heavyweight or lightweight. So you have here divisions and subdivisions, and then sub-subdivisions until you reach a level of detail that you can have a standard spec for it. So check the course webpage for a full outline of CSI master format. The next here is Sorry, I was interrupted by my daughter. So we'll continue. Next here is other parts of the documents that you'll have for a project are the contract conditions. So there are general conditions. From its name here, general conditions implies that they are general, applied and commonly applied between projects. So they establish the relationship between the owner, the architect, engineers, and the contractors. So they define how these relations will work during the project, and also establish the legal terms and procedures so they can work together in that team of the project. If you want to check more on details, this is covered in another course, but AIA, American Institute of Architects, they publish templates for contracts and general conditions. The template for it is A201. Now, if your project is special and it requires kind of unique requirements, then you will provide supplementary conditions document. So you will if these unique conditions are not in the general conditions standard in AIA, then you will have a document for this. So like special requirements for labor issues, union requirements, so you can list it in supplementary condition. Addenda is a document which is basically a bulletin, kind of a bulletin board, but it's a live document where during the bid, for any clarifications that come to the architect on the bid documents, they can respond to it in the addenda. So everyone studying and preparing for this project will have access to these clarifications and questions and approval of substitutions of materials or systems, or any other additional supplemental information that was not initially provided in the bid package that was published during the bidding process. So that's the kind of the first step in the planning process, is to define the scope. And to define the scope, you have to read a lot of things. You have to read the plans, get familiar with the project, read the specs, read the contract documents. You have to study. It's literally studying the project and trying to build that mental model of the project to understand really what's being built, and kind of start getting into how it will be built. So that will come next, but at least you have a definition of the project and its scope of work. So in the next videos, we'll cover the next steps here, which the next one here is work breakdown structure, WBS. Thanks for watching, and have a good day. Thank you.